The morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Catherine's Convent, casting colorful patterns across the worn wooden floor. Sister Agnes Moretti moved slowly down the hallway, her footsteps nearly silent despite the old building's tendency to creak and groan with every movement. At 78 years old, she had mastered the art of moving through the world without disturbing it. The convent was still quiet at this early hour. Most of the other sisters wouldn't rise for another 30 minutes when the morning bell would call them to prayer. These precious moments of solitude were what Sister Agnes looked forward to every day. She paused at the doorway of the community room, listening carefully for any sounds of early risers. Hearing nothing, she slipped inside and closed the door gently behind her. The room was simple: a few worn sofas, bookshelves filled with religious texts, and in the corner, covered with a faded cloth, sat an old upright piano. Sister Agnes approached it like an old friend. She removed the cloth carefully, folding it with practiced hands and placing it on a nearby chair. Her fingers, twisted slightly with arthritis, hovered over the keys for a moment before she sat down on the bench. Just a few minutes, she whispered to herself, a morning ritual that had become as much a part of her prayers as the formal ones she would recite later. She began to play softly, a simple Bach prelude that had been etched into her memory since childhood. Her fingers moved with surprising agility, finding each note with precision that belied her age and physical limitations. As she played, the years seemed to fall away. She was no longer Sister Agnes, the elderly nun who struggled to kneel during long services and needed reading glasses for even the largest print Bible. She was simply a musician, lost in the language that had spoken to her soul since she was a small child in Florence. Few people at St. Catherine's knew about Sister Agnes's relationship with the piano. When she had joined the order 60 years ago, personal accomplishments and talents were not celebrated. Humility was valued above all, and Sister Agnes had learned to keep her musical gift private, something between herself and God. The young novices who had joined the convent in recent years might have been surprised to know that before taking her vows at 18, Agnes Moretti had been considered something of a musical prodigy. Her father, a carpenter with a love for classical music, had scraped together enough money for lessons when her natural talent became impossible to ignore. Her teacher, an older Italian woman named Sophia, who had once performed in concert halls across Europe, had told Agnes's parents that their daughter had a rare gift. She doesn't just play the notes, Sophia had explained. She understands the music in a way that cannot be taught. There had been talk of music school, perhaps even a career as a concert pianist. But then came the calling, that quiet, persistent voice that Agnes could not ignore. Against her parents' wishes and her teacher's dismay, she had chosen the convent. Such a waste, her teacher had lamented. God gave you this talent for a reason. Yes, Agnes had replied with the certainty of youth. To play for him. But life in the order had been different than she imagined. The convent's old piano was mainly used for simple hymns during celebrations. There was little room for Bach or Chopin or Beethoven in the daily routine of prayer, work, and service. And so, over the decades, Sister Agnes had confined her playing to these early morning sessions, when she could express through music what she sometimes couldn't find words for in prayer. As she finished the Bach piece, she paused, letting the final notes hang in the air. Then, feeling a bit daring, she began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. This was music that spoke of longing, of beauty tinged with sadness. Her body swayed slightly as she played, her eyes closed, transported to another world. She didn't hear the door open. She didn't notice Sister Florence, the convent's bursar, standing in the doorway with wide eyes and an open mouth. It wasn't until she finished the piece that she sensed another presence in the room and turned around with a start. Sister Florence. I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. The younger nun, still in her 50s and relatively new to the administrative council, stood frozen for a moment before finding her voice. Sister Agnes, I had no idea. That was beautiful. Sister Agnes quickly covered the piano, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Just an old hobby. Nothing important. Nothing important? You play like a professional. Sister Agnes shook her head, reaching for the cloth to cover the piano again. It's just something I do for myself. And for God, I suppose. Sister Florence stepped further into the room. No, really. I studied a bit of music before joining the order. What you just played, that takes years of training. Why have you kept this hidden? Sister Agnes busied herself with adjusting the cloth over the piano, avoiding the younger nun's gaze. It wasn't hidden exactly, just private. When I joined, Mother Celestine felt that too much pride and personal talents could interfere with our devotion to service. She encouraged me to focus on more useful skills. But Mother Celestine has been gone for 20 years. Sister Agnes smiled gently. Old habits form deep grooves, Sister Florence. After a while, it seemed easier to keep playing in private. Besides, what use is a pianist in a convent? Sister Florence shook her head in disbelief. You really don't know what a gift you have, do you? Before Sister Agnes could respond, the morning bell began to ring, calling the nuns to prayer. She straightened her habit and smoothed her gray hair back under her veil. We should go, she said, moving toward the door with the slightly stiff gait that had become more pronounced in recent years. As they walked together toward the chapel, Sister Florence kept glancing at the older nun as if seeing her for the first time. You know we're having financial troubles, don't you? She asked suddenly. Sister Agnes nodded. Everyone knew the convent was struggling. Donations had decreased, maintenance costs for the aging building had increased, and their small income from handcrafted items sold at local markets barely covered their basic needs. Mother Superior is organizing a fundraiser next month, a community event to raise awareness and funds, Sister Florence continued. Perhaps you could play? It might draw more people if we advertised a musical performance. Sister Agnes stopped walking, genuinely shocked by the suggestion. Me? Play in public? Oh no, I couldn't possibly. Why not? I haven't played for anyone but myself in decades. I'm out of practice. My hands aren't what they used to be. She held up her fingers, which indeed showed the slight twisting of arthritis. Besides, no one would want to hear an old woman play. Sister Florence looked like she wanted to argue further, but they had reached the chapel door, and conversation ceased as they entered the sacred space. Sister Agnes took her usual place in the back row, her mind only partly on the morning prayers. The idea of playing in public after all these years both terrified and, if she was honest with herself, slightly thrilled her. Later that day, as she tended to the convent's small vegetable garden, Sister Agnes found herself humming Chopin while her hands worked in the soil. She hadn't allowed herself to even consider performing in many years. The thought brought back memories of her last recital before entering the convent. Her parents in the front row, her mother wiping away tears, her father sitting straight-backed and proud despite his work-roughened hands and simple clothes amid the wealthier families. You're in a good mood today, observed Sister Teresa, a spry 65-year-old who shared garden duties with Agnes. Am I? Agnes replied, suddenly aware of her humming. I suppose the sunshine brings it out in all of us. Well, whatever it is, it's nice to see. You've seemed a bit withdrawn lately. Had she? Agnes hadn't noticed. The days had begun to blur together in recent years, one much like another in the gentle rhythm of convent life. Perhaps that was why the idea of the fundraiser performance had caught her imagination. It was something different, unexpected. That evening, after dinner, Sister Agnes found herself approaching Mother Superior's office with uncharacteristic nervousness. She knocked softly on the heavy wooden door. Come in, called a warm voice. Mother Superior Sister Beatrice looked up from her desk with a smile. At 60, she was younger than Agnes, but carried the responsibility of leadership with a natural grace. Sister Agnes, what can I do for you? Agnes hesitated in the doorway. Sister Florence mentioned the fundraiser next month. I was wondering if, that is, I thought I might be able to contribute in some way. Mother Superior gestured to the chair across from her desk. Of course, any help would be appreciated. Did you have something specific in mind? Sitting down carefully, Agnes folded her hands in her lap to hide their slight trembling. I play the piano, or I used to, quite seriously. I thought perhaps I could perform something, if it would help. Mother Superior's eyebrows rose in surprise. I had no idea you were a pianist, Sister Agnes. You've been here for what, 50 years? 60 come November, Agnes corrected gently. 60 years and I'm still learning new things about you. Mother Superior smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea. Sister Florence is coordinating with the local music school for the event. Why don't you speak with her about adding you to the program? Agnes nodded, a mixture of excitement and terror swirling in her stomach. What had she just volunteered for? After decades of playing only for herself, the thought of an audience was daunting. But something inside her, some long-dormant spark, had ignited at the possibility of sharing her music again. As she left Mother Superior's office, Agnes realized she would need to practice more seriously than her casual morning sessions. The convent's piano was adequate but hadn't been tuned in years, and her repertoire, while extensive in her memory, would need refreshing in her fingers. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Sister Agnes found herself planning a program in her mind, something that would showcase the beauty of the music without seeming showy or prideful, something that might move hearts to generosity toward the convent that had been her home for so long. For the first time in many years, she fell asleep thinking not of prayers or convent duties, but of music. Beautiful, transcendent music that had been her first language, her first love, and perhaps, though she hardly dared to think it, her first calling. The news that Sister Agnes played the piano spread through St. Catherine's Convent like wildfire. By lunchtime, the day after her conversation with Mother Superior, sisters who had known her for decades were looking at her with newfound curiosity. "Is it true you're going to perform at the fundraiser?" Sister Lucia asked as she passed Agnes the bread basket during their midday meal. Agnes felt her cheeks warm. "I've offered to play a small piece or two, yes. Nothing special." Sister Veronica, one of the youngest nuns who had only taken her final vows last year, leaned forward with bright eyes. "Sister Florence says you play like a concert pianist." "Sister Florence exaggerates," Agnes replied, suddenly finding great interest in stirring her soup. "I had some training as a girl, that's all." But the interest in her hidden talent wouldn't fade so easily. Throughout the afternoon, as Agnes went about her duties in the convent library, organizing donated books and repairing damaged bindings, various sisters found reasons to stop by. Some were direct in their questions, others merely hinted at their curiosity, but all seemed eager to discover more about this unexpected side of a woman they thought they knew well. By evening, Agnes felt drained from the attention. She had spent 60 years in relative anonymity within these walls, content to be known simply as a dedicated, quiet sister who did her work without complaint. Now suddenly she had become something of a curiosity, and the feeling was uncomfortable. After evening prayers, she slipped away to the small courtyard garden where she often went when she needed solitude. The spring air was cool but not unpleasant, and the scent of early blooming flowers filled the small space. Agnes sat on a stone bench, her rosary beads moving through her fingers more from habit than conscious prayer. "May I join you?" The voice belonged to Sister Elizabeth, at 92 the oldest resident of the convent and someone Agnes had always respected deeply. Of course. Agnes moved slightly to make room on the bench. Sister Elizabeth lowered herself carefully onto the seat, her movements slow but deliberate. For a few minutes they sat in companionable silence, listening to the distant sounds of the city beyond the convent walls and the closer rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. "So you've decided to dust off your talent after all these years?" Sister Elizabeth said finally, her voice carrying no judgment. "Merely observation." Agnes sighed. "I'm beginning to regret it already. Everyone is making such a fuss." Sister Elizabeth chuckled, the sound surprisingly youthful coming from such an aged frame. "People always fuss over the unexpected. It will pass." "I'm not sure I can do it," Agnes admitted. "Play in front of people again. It's been so long." The older nun turned slightly to study Agnes's face in the fading light. "Why did you stop, really?" It was a piercing question, one that cut through the easy explanations Agnes had given herself and others over the years. She remained silent for a long moment, searching for the truth. "Fear, I suppose," she said finally. "When I was young, before I joined the order, music was everything to me. I loved it too much, I think. It felt dangerous." "Dangerous?" Sister Elizabeth prompted gently. "It made me proud, made me want recognition and applause. When I played well, I felt special, set apart. When I came here, I learned that true holiness comes from humility, from sameness, from blending in with the community." Sister Elizabeth nodded slowly. "That was the old way of thinking, yes. When we were young, individual talents were sometimes seen as distractions from spiritual growth. Mother Celestine suggested I focus on more practical skills." Agnes continued. "She wasn't unkind about it, but she made it clear that my music was indulgent. So I played less and less, and eventually only in private." "And did it work?" Sister Elizabeth asked. "Did giving up music make you more holy?" Agnes couldn't help but laugh softly at the directness of the question. I'm not sure anyone is qualified to judge their own holiness, sister. But I know that something in me went quiet when I stopped playing regularly. A voice that had always been there just faded. Sister Elizabeth reached over and patted Agnes's hand, her paper-thin skin cool in the evening air. God gives us gifts for a reason, Agnes. Perhaps the reason isn't always what we expect, but to bury a gift entirely. She shook her head. I'm not convinced that's what he intends. The next morning, Agnes rose even earlier than usual. The conversation with Sister Elizabeth had stirred something in her, a resolve to take this opportunity seriously. If she was going to play at the fundraiser, she would need to prepare properly. The community room was empty and dark when she entered. She turned on just one small lamp, casting long shadows across the floor. The piano waited, its presence somehow more commanding now that it represented not just her private devotion, but a public commitment. Agnes uncovered it carefully and opened the fallboard. The keys, yellowed with age, seemed to welcome her touch. She began with simple scales, warming up fingers that felt stiff in the cool morning air. Gradually, she moved into more complex exercises, the kind her teacher Sophia had drilled into her decades ago. After 30 minutes of technical work, she opened a book of Bach preludes that she had kept hidden in her room for years, its pages worn from use. She played through several pieces, noting where her fingers stumbled or where the rhythm faltered. There was work to be done, but the foundation remained solid. She was so absorbed in her practice that she didn't notice Sister Florence enter until the younger nun spoke. That sounds wonderful already, she said, making Agnes jump slightly on the bench. Sorry to startle you. Agnes closed the music book quickly, an old habit of hiding her passion resurfacing. I'm just refreshing my memory. These old fingers aren't as nimble as they once were. Sister Florence came closer, an envelope in her hand. I've been working with Mr. Russo from the music school on the fundraiser program. We're finalizing the details this week. She hesitated, then continued. I was wondering what pieces you're planning to play. Agnes hadn't fully decided yet. Perhaps a Bach prelude and maybe a short Chopin piece. Nothing too ambitious. Sister Florence's expression shifted slightly, becoming more careful. That sounds lovely. The thing is, Mr. Russo has arranged for several of his advanced students to perform. They're quite accomplished young pianists. Agnes felt a flicker of understanding. And you're worried my playing might not measure up? No. No, not at all, Sister Florence said quickly, but her eyes betrayed her concern. It's just that these students have been preparing for months. They're working on quite challenging pieces. Liszt, Rachmaninoff. I thought perhaps... She trailed off, seemingly unsure how to continue. Perhaps I should reconsider. Agnes finished for her. Play something simpler. Or perhaps not play at all. Sister Florence looked distressed. I didn't mean... It's just that the fundraiser is so important for the convent. We need it to be impressive, to attract donors, and these young pianists are really quite remarkable. Agnes nodded slowly, a hollow feeling spreading in her chest. I understand completely. The focus should be on them, not on an old nun indulging in nostalgia. That's not what I... It's all right. Sister Florence, truly, I appreciate your honesty. Agnes stood up, closing the piano carefully. I think it's best if I step aside. The students should have their moment to shine. Sister Florence looked like she wanted to say more, but seemed to think better of it. She nodded, relief evident despite her attempt to hide it. Thank you for understanding. Your humility is an example to us all. After Sister Florence left, Agnes remained standing by the piano, one hand resting lightly on its closed lid. The familiar feeling of disappointment was there, but sharper now after the brief flare of hope. She had allowed herself to imagine sharing her music again, and the reality of being gently but firmly set aside stung more than she had expected. Throughout the day, as she went about her usual tasks, Agnes found herself dwelling on Sister Florence's words. The younger nun hadn't been cruel, merely practical. The fundraiser needed to showcase impressive talent, not an elderly sister whose skills had likely dulled with age and lack of serious practice. Yet something about the dismissal rankled. It reminded her too much of other moments in her life when she had been overlooked or underestimated. When she had first expressed her desire to join the convent, her piano teacher had acted as though Agnes was throwing away her future. You could play in concert halls, Sophia had insisted. Instead, you'll be scrubbing floors and singing simple hymns. Even her parents, supportive as they were of her vocation, had questioned whether she could truly be happy without music as the center of her life. God has given you this gift, her father had said. Are you sure he wants you to set it aside? At dinner that evening, Agnes noticed several sisters glancing her way, then quickly looking down when she caught their eyes. Word had spread about her removal from the program, it seemed. The thought made her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She excused herself early and retreated to her small room. Unlike some of the more ascetic sisters, Agnes had always kept a few personal items that connected her to her life before the convent. A small photograph of her parents on their wedding day, a pressed flower from her mother's garden, and tucked away in a drawer, rarely examined now, a program from her final recital before entering the convent, when she had played Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata to a standing ovation. Agnes retrieved this last item and sat on the edge of her narrow bed, studying the yellowed paper in the dim light. Her name, her maiden name, Agnesa Moretti, was printed there in elegant script. A rising talent, the program called her. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She quickly tucked the program away before calling, "Come in." Mother Superior entered, her expression gentle but concerned. "Sister Agnes, may we talk?" Agnes gestured to the room's only chair while she remained seated on the bed. "Of course, Mother. I've just spoken with Sister Florence about the fundraiser program," Mother Superior began, settling into the chair. "She mentioned there had been a change in plans regarding your performance." Agnes folded her hands in her lap, trying to keep her voice even. "Yes. It seems the program is already quite full with talented young students. It's for the best, really." Mother Superior studied her face. "Are you disappointed?" Agnes hesitated, torn between honesty and the habit of self-effacement. "Perhaps a little," she admitted. "But Sister Florence is right. The focus should be on the students." "I see." Mother Superior was quiet for a moment. "Sister Florence is young and eager to make the fundraiser a success. Sometimes in her enthusiasm she makes decisions hastily. She means well." "Yes, she does." Mother Superior leaned forward slightly. "But I'm not convinced she's right in this instance. I would still very much like to hear you play, Sister Agnes. Perhaps not at the main fundraiser if that makes you uncomfortable now, but another time." Agnes felt a small spark of warmth at the words. "Thank you, Mother. That's very kind." After Mother Superior left, Agnes found herself restless. Sleep seemed far away despite the late hour. On impulse, she took her room key and quietly made her way through the darkened hallways of the convent to the community room. The moon was bright enough that she didn't need to turn on a lamp. She uncovered the piano and sat down, her fingers finding the keys by memory and moonlight. Softly, so as not to disturb the sleeping convent, she began to play the piece she had been considering for the fundraiser, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The music rose and fell like gentle waves, filling the room with a beauty that seemed almost visible in the silvery light. Agnes played with closed eyes, letting the familiar notes wash over her. In this moment, with no audience but the moon and the sleeping saints in the stained glass windows, she remembered why she had loved music so deeply. It wasn't about recognition or applause. It was about this sense of connection to something larger than herself, this language that spoke when words failed. As the final notes faded, Agnes opened her eyes and found she was no longer alone. In the doorway stood a man she didn't recognize, watching her with an expression of undisguised wonder. Agnes's hands froze on the keys. The stranger in the doorway was tall and well-dressed, his silver hair catching the moonlight. He appeared to be in his 60s, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners as he smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry to intrude," he said softly. "I didn't want to interrupt such beautiful playing." Agnes quickly stood, smoothing her habit with nervous hands. "The convent is closed to visitors at this hour, sir." "How did you get in?" The man stepped into the room but kept a respectful distance. "I'm staying in the guest quarters. I arrived with Cardinal Russo this evening." He gave a slight bow. "Paolo Bianchi. I serve as the Cardinal's personal assistant." Agnes relaxed slightly. She had heard that Cardinal Russo would be visiting the convent, though he wasn't expected until tomorrow. He was an important benefactor for their order, and his visit had been planned to coincide with the fundraiser. "I see. Welcome to St. Catherine's, Mr. Bianchi. I'm Sister Agnes." "Sister Agnes." He repeated her name thoughtfully. "Your playing is extraordinary. That was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, wasn't it? One of my favorites. Agnes nodded, surprised by his knowledge. You know classical music? A warm smile spread across his face. Before I worked for the Cardinal, I was a concert pianist. Not a very famous one, but I had a modest career. You were a pianist? Agnes couldn't hide her interest. And now you work for the church? Paolo's expression grew more serious. Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? A hand injury ended my performing career about 15 years ago. The Cardinal, who had been a friend and supporter of the arts, offered me a position. It's been a blessing in disguise. Agnes found herself drawn to this stranger who understood the world she had left behind. I'm sorry about your injury, he shrugged. God closes one door and opens another, as they say. He gestured toward the piano. But your playing is remarkable. Especially for someone who... He hesitated. For someone my age? Agnes finished with a small smile. For someone who plays in secret at midnight. He corrected gently. How long have you been playing? Since I was 6, but I've played less and less over the years. She glanced down at her hands. These days it's mostly just for myself. Paolo took a step closer, his expression curious. May I ask why? With your talent, Agnes sighed. How could she explain the complex mixture of faith, fear, and convention that had led her to set aside her music? It's complicated, she said finally. When I joined the order, individual talents weren't exactly encouraged. We were meant to blend in, to find our worth in service rather than personal accomplishments. And you accepted that? The question wasn't judgmental, merely interested, but it made Agnes pause. Had she accepted it truly, or had she simply gone along, following the path of least resistance? I believed it was right at the time, she said carefully. I still believe there's wisdom in humility, but perhaps I took it too far, turned it into something else, fear maybe, or hiding. The clock in the hallway chimed once, midnight. Agnes started at the sound. It's very late. I should return to my room. Paolo nodded. Of course. I've kept you too long. He stepped back toward the door, but paused. Sister Agnes, would you mind if I told the Cardinal about your playing? He's a great lover of music, Agnes hesitated. The thought of more attention made her uncomfortable, yet something about Paolo's genuine appreciation made her reluctant to refuse. If you wish, she said finally, though I don't see what would come of it. Perhaps nothing, Paolo admitted. Or perhaps something wonderful. Good night, Sister Agnes. Good night, Mr. Bianchi. As Agnes made her way back to her room, she felt strangely unsettled. The conversation with Paolo had stirred memories and questions she had long ago set aside. What might her life have been if she had pursued music instead of taking her vows? Would she have found fulfillment on that path? And why, after all these years, did such questions still have the power to disturb her peace? Sleep came fitfully that night, filled with dreams of music and memories half forgotten. The next morning brought the formal arrival of Cardinal Russo. The entire convent gathered to welcome him. The sisters lined up neatly in the main hall as the elderly but still imposing cardinal made his entrance. Paolo walked slightly behind him, and when his eyes met Agnes's in the lineup, he gave her a small, conspiratorial smile. The day passed in a flurry of special activities. The cardinal toured the convent, met with Mother Superior to discuss funding needs, and joined the sisters for meals. Agnes went about her usual duties, trying not to dwell on the previous night's encounter, yet finding her thoughts returning to it repeatedly. By late afternoon, she was in the library, reorganizing a shelf of theological texts, when Sister Florence appeared at her elbow. Sister Agnes, Mother Superior would like to see you in her office right away, she said. Her expression unreadable. Agnes set down the book she was holding. Is something wrong? She didn't say, just that you should come immediately. With a growing sense of apprehension, Agnes made her way to Mother Superior's office. Had she done something wrong? Was it about her midnight playing? She knocked tentatively on the heavy wooden door. Come in, called Mother Superior. Agnes entered to find not only Mother Superior, but also Cardinal Russo and Paolo waiting for her. The cardinal sat in an armchair by the window while Paolo stood nearby. Mother Superior rose from behind her desk with a smile that Agnes couldn't quite interpret. Sister Agnes, thank you for coming so promptly, Mother Superior said. His Eminence has something he would like to discuss with you. The cardinal, a robust man despite his 80 years, fixed Agnes with bright, intelligent eyes. Sister Agnes, My assistant Paolo has told me something quite remarkable about you. He says you play the piano like an angel. Agnes felt her cheeks grow warm. Mr. Bianchi is very kind, but I fear he exaggerates, Your Eminence. Paolo shook his head. I do not exaggerate. What I heard last night was extraordinary. It wasn't just technically proficient. It was moving, deeply moving. The Cardinal leaned forward slightly. Paolo was once a concert pianist himself, Sister Agnes. He doesn't offer such praise lightly. Mother Superior gestured for Agnes to take a seat. The Cardinal has made a suggestion that I find quite interesting. I wanted you to hear it directly from him. Cardinal Russo nodded. I understand you were initially going to perform at the upcoming fundraiser, but that plans have changed. Agnes glanced at Mother Superior, wondering how much she knew about Sister Florence's decision. Yes, that's correct. It was decided that the focus should be on the young students from the music school. A worthy focus, the Cardinal agreed. But I have another proposal. The day after the fundraiser, I am hosting a private concert at my residence for some of the church's most generous benefactors. These are people who have the means to make a significant difference to institutions like St. Catherine's. I would be honored if you would consider playing at this event. Agnes stared at him, stunned. Me? Play for your benefactors? Paolo recorded a portion of your performance last night on his phone. The Cardinal explained, and Agnes felt a jolt of surprise. With his background, I trust his judgment implicitly. But when he played the recording for me this morning, even I was astonished. Your playing has a spiritual quality that is rare, Sister Agnes. It speaks to the soul. Mother Superior nodded encouragingly. I've heard the recording too. It's beautiful, Sister Agnes, truly beautiful. Agnes felt overwhelmed. She hadn't even known she was being recorded. The thought of playing for a room full of wealthy strangers made her heart race with anxiety. I don't know what to say, Your Eminence, I'm honored, but it's been so long since I've played formally, and my repertoire is limited to what I can remember or the few pieces of music I've kept over the years. Paolo stepped forward. I took the liberty of bringing some sheet music with me, classics that I thought might suit your style, based on what I heard. And there's a fine piano at the Cardinal's residence where you could practice beforehand. Agnes looked from Paolo to the Cardinal to Mother Superior, feeling cornered, despite their kind intentions. May I have some time to think about this? Of course, the Cardinal said gently. But not too long. The event is in just over a week. Mother Superior walked with Agnes to the door. This could be a wonderful opportunity, Sister Agnes. Not just for you, but for the convent. The Cardinal's benefactors are extremely generous. Agnes nodded, understanding the unspoken message. This wasn't just about music. It was about securing much-needed funds for St. Catherine's. As she left the office, Agnes nearly collided with Sister Florence, who was passing by in the hallway. The younger nun's expression made it clear she had overheard at least part of the conversation. So you'll be playing for the Cardinal's wealthy friends? Sister Florence said, her tone carefully neutral. Nothing has been decided, Agnes replied. Sister Florence adjusted the stack of papers she was carrying. I hope you're not upset about the fundraiser program. I was only thinking of what would be most effective. I understand, Agnes said, though the memory of the dismissal still stung. The thing is, Sister Florence continued, lowering her voice, some of the younger sisters feel that it's not appropriate for someone your age to be suddenly showcased. It could seem like pride, you understand. After all these years of keeping your talent hidden, to suddenly want the spotlight. I never asked for any spotlight, Agnes interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. I offered to play a simple piece at the fundraiser because I thought it might help, that's all. Sister Florence looked taken aback by the unusual show of assertion from the normally quiet older nun. Of course, I didn't mean to imply. Well, I'm sure you'll make the right decision about the Cardinal's offer. As Sister Florence hurried away, Agnes stood in the hallway, her thoughts in turmoil. Was it pride that made her want to accept the Cardinal's invitation? The desire to prove Sister Florence wrong? Or was it something deeper? The chance to reconnect with the part of herself she had kept silent for so long? She made her way to the chapel, seeking the calm and clarity that usually came to her in that sacred space. The afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the worn stone floor. Agnes knelt in her usual spot, but instead of beginning her usual prayers, she found herself simply sitting in silence, listening. What did God want from her? Was her music truly a gift meant to be shared, or was it, as she had been taught long ago, a potential source of vanity better kept private? The chapel door opened, and Agnes turned to see Paolo enter. He spotted her, and hesitated, clearly unsure whether to intrude on her prayers. Agnes found herself gesturing for him to join her. He came and sat in the pew behind her, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm sorry if the Cardinal's invitation has caused you distress," he said quietly after a moment. "It wasn't my intention." "Why did you record me without permission?" Agnes asked, turning to face him. Paolo had the grace to look embarrassed. "I acted impulsively. Your playing was so beautiful, and I knew the Cardinal wouldn't believe me without evidence." He paused. "I can delete it if you wish." Agnes considered this. "No, that's not necessary. I'm not used to being the center of attention. It makes me uncomfortable." "May I ask you something, Sister Agnes?" When she nodded, he continued. "Do you still love it, playing the piano?" The question was simple but profound. Agnes closed her eyes briefly, thinking of how it felt to lose herself in the music, the way time seemed to stop when her fingers touched the keys. "Yes," she admitted softly. "I never stopped loving it." "Then perhaps this is God's way of giving you back something precious," Paolo suggested. "Not for your glory, but for His." As Agnes looked into his kind, understanding eyes, something shifted inside her. The years of holding back, of making herself small, of hiding her light, perhaps that had never been what God wanted from her after all. "Will you help me prepare?" she asked, making her decision. "If I'm going to do this, I want to do it properly." Paolo's face broke into a wide smile. "It would be my honor, Sister Agnes." The next 5 days passed in a whirlwind of activity unlike anything Agnes had experienced in decades. With Mother Superior's blessing, she was temporarily relieved of most of her regular duties to focus on preparing for the Cardinal's concert. Each morning after prayers, she would spend 3 hours practicing on the convent's piano, and each afternoon Paolo would arrive to work with her for another 2 hours. The first day of their practice together, Paolo brought several pieces of sheet music for her to try. Agnes, despite her initial nervousness, found herself warming to his gentle teaching style. Unlike her childhood teacher Sophia, who had been demanding and sometimes harsh, Paolo offered guidance with patience and genuine respect for her abilities. "Your technique is remarkably preserved," he told her during their first session as she worked through a challenging passage of a Mozart sonata. "Your fingers remember more than you think they do." Agnes smiled at that. "My fingers may remember, but they don't always obey as quickly as they used to." "That will come with practice," Paolo assured her. "The important thing is that your musicality is intact. That can't be taught, it's a gift." By the third day, they had settled on a program, Bach's Prelude in C major to open, followed by Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major that Paolo had first heard her play, and concluding with Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, the piece she had performed at her final recital before entering the convent. This last selection had been Paolo's suggestion, and Agnes had initially resisted. "I haven't played it in 60 years, she protested. "It's too ambitious." "Try it," he urged, placing the sheet music before her. "Just the first movement. See if it comes back to you." Reluctantly, Agnes began to play. The opening chords were hesitant, her tempo cautious, but as she continued, something remarkable happened. Her body seemed to remember what her mind had forgotten. Her fingers found the patterns they had practiced thousands of times in her youth, and the music began to flow more naturally. She made mistakes, certainly, missed notes, blurred passages, but the essence of the piece was there. When she finished the first movement, she looked up to see Paolo watching her with shining eyes. "You see?" he said quietly. "It's still in you." Agnes felt a strange mixture of emotions, pride, Yes, but also a profound sense of reconnection with a part of herself she had buried long ago. "It will need work," she said, trying to sound practical despite the tremor in her voice. "We have time," Paolo assured her. "And you have heart. The notes can be polished, but the feeling, that's what will move people." As word spread through the convent about Agnes's upcoming performance, reactions were mixed. Many sisters expressed delight and support, eager to discover this hidden side of someone they had known for years. Sister Elizabeth in particular seemed pleased. "I always sensed there was more to you than met the eye," the elderly nun told Agnes one evening after dinner. "I'm glad others will finally see it too." But not everyone was enthusiastic. Agnes noticed Sister Florence and several of the younger nuns watching her practice sessions with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disapproval. Occasionally she would catch snippets of whispered conversations that fell silent when she approached, suddenly acting like a prima donna. All these special privileges, what happened to her vow of humility? These comments stung, but Agnes tried not to let them distract her from the task at hand. She had made a commitment to the cardinal, and more importantly, she had made a commitment to herself. After decades of keeping her music private, she would finally share it again, whatever the consequences. The day of the convent fundraiser arrived, and despite her exclusion from the program, Agnes attended to show support for the young pianists from the music school. The event was held in the convent's main hall, which had been transformed with flowers and decorations for the occasion. A rented grand piano stood on a small platform at one end of the room, looking far grander than the convent's worn upright. Agnes sat quietly at the back, listening as student after student performed their carefully prepared pieces. They were talented, certainly, some technically brilliant, but as she watched, Agnes found herself noticing something that surprised her. Despite their skill, many of the young performers seemed disconnected from the music itself, focusing so intently on hitting the right notes that the emotion behind the pieces was lost. "They play perfectly," a voice murmured beside her, and Agnes turned to find Paolo had joined her. "But without soul." Agnes nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "They're young. The feeling will come with time and life experience." "Perhaps," Paolo agreed. "Or perhaps they need teachers who understand that music is more than just the notes on the page." The concert concluded with enthusiastic applause, and Sister Florence, who had acted as master of ceremonies, gave a speech thanking the performers and encouraging donations to support the convent's needs. Agnes noticed the collection baskets being passed around the room, some filling with checks and cash, others remaining nearly empty. Despite the polished performances, the fundraiser didn't seem to be generating the level of financial support they had hoped for. Later that evening, as Agnes was returning to her room, Mother Superior stopped her in the hallway. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" she asked, her expression kind but concerned. Agnes took a deep breath. "As ready as I can be, Mother. I've practiced diligently. I have no doubt of that." Mother Superior hesitated, then added, "I want you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, you have already brought joy to many here at St. Catherine's. Your dedication to rediscovering your gift has been inspiring to watch." "Not to everyone," Agnes said softly, thinking of Sister Florence's disapproving glances. Mother Superior smiled wryly. "Change is difficult for some to accept, especially when it challenges their assumptions." She patted Agnes's arm. "Rest well tonight. We'll all be praying for you tomorrow." Agnes tried to follow this advice, but sleep proved elusive. She lay awake in her narrow bed, her mind cycling through the pieces she would play, imagining her fingers on the keys, hearing the music in her head. What if she failed? What if her memory faltered or her arthritic hands betrayed her? What if the wealthy audience found her performance amateur or worse, pathetic, an old woman trying to recapture something long past? She must have dozed eventually, because she woke with a start to find early morning light filtering through her window. She rose and dressed with care in her cleanest habit, saying her morning prayers with more fervor than usual. At breakfast, several sisters wished her luck, while others merely watched her with curious eyes. Sister Florence was noticeably absent from the meal. As arranged, a car from the Cardinal's residence arrived at 9 o'clock to take Agnes to the venue for a final rehearsal. Paolo was waiting for her when she arrived, his face lighting up at the sight of her. "Sister Agnes," Come, let me show you the piano you'll be playing. He led her through the cardinal's elegant residence to a spacious music room dominated by a magnificent Steinway grand piano. Agnes gasped involuntarily at the sight of it, gleaming black and imposing. "It's beautiful," she whispered, approaching it almost reverently. "Try it," Paolo encouraged. "Feel the action of the keys. It's very different from the convent's piano." Agnes sat on the bench and placed her hands on the keys. The first chord she played rang out with a clarity and resonance that made her catch her breath. The piano responded to the lightest touch, the sound rich and vibrant in a way the convent's worn instrument could never match. "Oh," she breathed, playing a simple scale, marveling at the sound. "It's like driving a fine car after years of pushing a rusty bicycle." Paolo laughed at the unexpected comparison. "Exactly. Now shall we run through your program once before lunch? The guests won't arrive until 3 o'clock. The rehearsal went well, though Agnes found herself having to adjust to the piano's sensitive touch. It was easy to play too loudly, too emphatically on such a responsive instrument. Paolo offered gentle corrections and encouragement, helping her find the right balance. After lunch, Agnes retreated to a small guest room to rest before the performance. She sat in a comfortable chair by the window, looking out at the cardinal's manicured gardens, trying to calm her increasingly frayed nerves. Despite all the practice, despite Paolo's confidence in her, she found herself gripped by doubt. What had possessed her to agree to this? She was a simple nun, not a performer. She had left that life behind decades ago. A soft knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Paolo or perhaps one of the cardinal's staff. To her surprise, it was Sister Florence who entered, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. Agnes stood, unable to hide her shock. "Sister Florence? What are you doing here?" The younger nun twisted her hands together nervously. "Mother Superior sent me. She thought you might need support from the convent today." Agnes wasn't sure what to say. Of all the sisters who might have been sent, Florence seemed the least likely choice. "That was thoughtful," she managed finally. "Thank you for coming." An awkward silence fell between them. Sister Florence walked to the window, looking out at the same garden view Agnes had been contemplating. "It's almost time, isn't it?" she asked. Agnes nodded. "The guests will be arriving soon." Sister Florence turned to face her, her expression troubled. "I owe you an apology, Sister Agnes. I've been difficult about your playing, unsupportive." "You were doing what you thought best for the fundraiser," Agnes replied carefully. "No." Florence shook her head firmly. "I was being prideful and judgmental. The truth is, when I first heard you play it frightened me, frightened you," Agnes repeated, bewildered. "How?" Florence sighed deeply. "Because it made me question things I thought I knew. About age. About what we're capable of, about—" She hesitated. "About you. I've been at the convent for 15 years, and I thought I knew who you were. A quiet, elderly sister who was gradually fading into the background. And then suddenly you were this artist with a profound gift. It made me realize how many assumptions I make every day, about everyone around me." Agnes was touched by the younger woman's honesty. "We all make assumptions, Sister Florence. I've made plenty myself over the years. Yesterday, after the fundraiser," Florence continued, "I overheard Mr. Russo from the music school telling Mother Superior that our event had raised less than half what we'd hoped for. And I realized that in my determination to showcase technical excellence, I'd created a program that was impressive but soulless." She met Agnes's eyes directly. "I should have let you play." "You couldn't have known," Agnes said gently. "I should have listened instead of judging." Florence stepped closer, her expression earnest. "But I'm listening now, Sister Agnes, and I'll be listening today along with everyone else." A knock at the door announced Paolo, come to tell Agnes it was time. The guests had arrived, and the cardinal was ready to introduce her. Agnes felt a sudden surge of panic. "I don't think I can do this," she whispered. To her surprise, it was Sister Florence who took her trembling hands. "Yes, you can," she said firmly. "God didn't preserve your gift for 60 years just to have it fail you now. Play for Him, Sister Agnes. The rest of us are just privileged to listen." With Sister Florence on one side and Paolo on the other, Agnes made her way to the music room, which was now filled with elegantly dressed men and women holding champagne glasses and conversing quietly. They fell silent as she entered, their expressions curious as they took in the sight of the elderly nun in her simple habit. The cardinal stepped forward to introduce her, saying a few words about the convent's needs and Agnes's remarkable talent. Agnes barely heard him, focusing instead on the piano waiting for her, its lid raised to project the sound to the farthest corners of the room. And then it was time. She walked to the piano, adjusted the bench, and sat down. The room was utterly silent now, all eyes on her. Agnes closed her eyes briefly, offering a silent prayer. Then she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. As Agnes's fingers touched the keys for the opening notes of Bach's Prelude in C major, time seemed to slow. The familiar cascade of arpeggios flowed from her hands, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. The piano's rich tone filled the room, each note ringing with crystalline clarity. Agnes kept her eyes on the keys, too nervous yet to look at her audience. She focused instead on the music, on the mathematical precision of Bach's composition, on the way each chord resolved into the next, with inevitable logic. This piece had always calmed her, its ordered patterns creating a sense of rightness in the world. As she reached the final measures, she allowed herself a deep breath. The first hurdle had been cleared. She hadn't faltered or stumbled. The Bach had served its purpose, warming up her fingers and settling her nerves. Now came the Chopin, the piece Paolo had first heard her play in the moonlight. Agnes paused briefly, gathering herself for the shift in mood. Where Bach was structured and cerebral, Chopin was emotional and expressive. The nocturne required a different touch, a different part of herself. She began the opening melody, letting it sing above the gentle accompaniment of her left hand. As she played, Agnes finally found the courage to lift her gaze from the keys. What she saw nearly made her fingers stumble. The audience was completely still, not the polite attentiveness of people enduring a performance out of obligation, but the genuine stillness of people truly listening. Some had closed their eyes. Others were watching her hands with expressions of wonder. Near the back of the room, Sister Florence stood with tears streaming silently down her face. Something shifted inside Agnes. The nervousness that had gripped her since agreeing to perform began to melt away, replaced by a sense of peaceful purpose. This wasn't about her, she realized. It wasn't about impressing anyone or proving anything. It was simply about sharing something beautiful, something true. The nocturne flowed from her fingers with new freedom, the melancholy middle section expressing a lifetime of quiet joys and sorrows, the return of the main theme bringing a sense of acceptance and peace. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence before the applause began. Hesitant at first, then building to enthusiastic appreciation. Agnes acknowledged the applause with a slight nod, her cheeks flushing at the unexpected warmth of the response. But she knew the real test still lay ahead. The Beethoven Sonata was by far the most demanding piece on her program, both technically and emotionally. Even in her youth, it had pushed the limits of her abilities. Now, with her arthritic hands and decades away from serious practice, it would require everything she had. She took a moment to flex her fingers, which were already feeling the strain of playing on the responsive but demanding Steinway. From the corner of her eye, she caught Paolo watching her with concern. He had warned her that the Pathétique might be too ambitious, too physically taxing for her first performance in so many years. Perhaps he had been right, but something stubborn in Agnes refused to take the easier path. She had chosen this piece not despite its difficulty, but because of it. Because it represented the height of her abilities. Because it had been the last thing she played before closing that chapter of her life. Because it deserved to be the piece that reopened it. She positioned her hands and launched into the dramatic C minor opening chords of the sonata. The power of the music immediately filled the room, the grave introduction giving way to the fiery allegro. As Agnes navigated the challenging passages, she could feel the strain in her hands, especially in the left where her arthritis was worst. A few notes were missed, a few runs less clean than she would have liked, but she pushed forward, carried by the music's own momentum. Then came a particularly difficult passage, a series of rapid scale figures that had always challenged her. Agnes felt her left hand begin to cramp, the pain shooting up her wrist. For a terrible moment, she thought she might have to stop. A wave of despair washed over her. After all the work, All the courage it had taken to get here, to fail now seemed unbearable. In that moment of crisis, Agnes did something she had never done before in all her years of playing. She closed her eyes and silently prayed, not for success or technical perfection, but for the strength to share what was in her heart regardless of the limitations of her body. What happened next was something Agnes would never be able to fully explain. It was as if her pain receded, not gone, but somehow less important. Her hands found the notes they needed almost of their own accord. The music flowed through her rather than from her. The audience seemed to sense the transformation. The room grew even more still, the atmosphere charged with collective emotion. As Agnes moved into the famous Adagio cantabile second movement, she played with a depth of feeling that surprised even herself. This slow singing melody had always moved her, but now it seemed to carry the weight of her entire life. The youthful dreams set aside, the quiet years of service, the private moments of joy and doubt, the rediscovery of her voice, the final movement with its flowing rondo form, came almost as a release after the emotional intensity of the Adagio. Agnes's fingers danced across the keys with unexpected lightness, the playful melody offering a contrast to the drama of the first movement and the poignancy of the second. As she approached the final chords, she felt a surge of something like joy, not just at having made it through the challenging piece, but at having found herself again in the music. The final C minor chord resonated through the room. Agnes sat perfectly still, her hands resting on the keys, unwilling to break the spell. Then slowly she became aware of the silence around her. Had she failed after all? Had her imperfect performance disappointed these sophisticated listeners? She looked up uncertainly and saw that many in the audience were weeping openly. Others sat with expressions of stunned appreciation. And then, as if on cue, the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, their faces alight with genuine emotion. The cardinal came forward, taking Agnes's hand to help her rise from the piano bench. "Sister Agnes," he said, his own voice thick with feeling. That was not merely a performance. It was a prayer. The next hours passed in something of a blur for Agnes. People crowded around her, offering congratulations, asking questions, sharing how her playing had moved them. Several of the cardinal's guests pressed business cards into her hand, mentioning concert opportunities, recording possibilities, master classes for advanced students. "You could be recording within months," one elegantly dressed woman told her earnestly. "There's a tremendous appetite for authentic, emotionally resonant classical playing. And your story, a hidden talent discovered after all these years, it's absolutely compelling." Agnes smiled politely at these suggestions, but inside she felt overwhelmed. This wasn't what she had expected or sought. She had agreed to play one concert to help the convent, not to launch a late-life career as a performer. Paolo, sensing her discomfort, eventually intervened, guiding her to a quiet corner where Sister Florence was waiting. "You were magnificent," Florence said simply, her earlier tears replaced by a look of quiet wonder. "I've never heard anything like it." "Thank you," Agnes replied, genuinely touched by the younger nun's transformation from critic to supporter. "Though I made plenty of mistakes." Florence shook her head firmly. No one was counting mistakes. We were too busy feeling the music. She hesitated, then added, "Mother Superior called while you were playing the final piece. Apparently, word has spread about your performance. There are already calls coming into the convent, journalists wanting interviews, people asking if you'll play at other events." Agnes felt a flutter of panic. "I don't think I'm ready for that kind of attention." "No one is asking you to decide anything tonight," Paolo assured her, joining the conversation. "But Sister Agnes, you should know that something extraordinary happened here. Your playing touched people deeply. That's a rare gift." The cardinal approached, beaming with satisfaction. "Sister Agnes, I've just been speaking with some of our most generous supporters. They've been so moved by your performance that they've pledged substantial donations to St. Catherine's, enough to cover the repair costs for the convent roof, the new heating system, and still have funds remaining for your educational programs." Agnes felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "That's wonderful news, Your Eminence. Thank you for giving me this opportunity." "The thanks is mine to give," the cardinal replied warmly. "And there's more. Several guests have expressed interest in establishing a music scholarship fund in your name to help talented young people who might otherwise lack the resources to develop their gifts. As the evening drew to a close, Agnes found herself sitting alone for a moment in a quiet alcove off the main room. The emotional and physical exertion of the performance had left her exhausted, but strangely peaceful. Whatever came next, she had reclaimed a part of herself that had been silent for too long. Paolo found her there, offering to drive her and Sister Florence back to the convent. "You must be tired," he said gently. Agnes nodded, but a good kind of tired, like after a long journey when you finally reach your destination. 6 months later, Agnes sat in the newly renovated music room at St. Catherine's Convent. Where once there had been only the old upright piano, now there stood a beautiful baby grand, a gift from one of the cardinal's donors who had been moved by her playing. The room itself had been transformed as well, with improved acoustics, comfortable seating, and large windows that filled the space with natural light. It had become the heart of a new program at the convent: weekly concerts open to the community, and music lessons for neighborhood children who couldn't afford private instruction. Agnes watched as Sister Florence guided a young girl through a simple Bach minuet. Her patience and encouragement a far cry from the judgmental nun of months before. Florence had surprised everyone by revealing her own modest piano skills and volunteering to help with the beginners in their new music program. "Very good, Lily," Florence said as the child finished the piece. "You've been practicing." The girl beamed with pride before gathering her music and saying goodbye. As she left, Paolo entered carrying a stack of sheet music. "Ready for our duet practice?" he asked Agnes with a smile. After the Cardinal's concert, Agnes had declined most of the opportunities that had come her way. She had no desire for fame or a public career, but she had agreed to a few select performances for charitable causes, and had made a single recording, a collection of nocturnes that had quickly gained attention for its emotional depth and unusual backstory. More importantly to Agnes, she had embraced her role as a teacher and mentor. 3 days a week she worked with advanced students from the local university, sharing not just technique but the spiritual and emotional dimensions of music that had been her private joy for so many years. "I'm ready," she told Paolo, moving to the piano. Their weekly duet practice had become a highlight of her new life, a chance to share music with someone who understood both its challenges and its transcendent possibilities. As they settled side by side on the bench, Agnes reflected on the unexpected journey of the past months. At 78, when most people were winding down their lives, hers had opened into new dimensions of purpose and joy. "Shall we begin with Mozart?" Paolo suggested. Agnes nodded, positioning her hands on the keys beside his. As they began to play, their music blending in perfect harmony, she sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. The gift she had hidden for so many years had finally found its true purpose, not in acclaim or recognition, but in building bridges between hearts, between generations, between the sacred and the everyday. The melody rose and fell, filling the sunlit room with beauty. Outside, a group of novices paused in the garden to listen, their young faces turning toward the music like flowers seeking the sun. Inside, Agnes played on, her spirit as free and resonant as the notes that flowed from her fingers. No longer denied, no longer silent, but singing at last her own unique song.